The cold water was the last thing I felt before the world disappeared. Ice cold, flooding over me, and then nothing. Not sleep, not unconsciousness the way I'd ever understood it. Something else entirely. Something I still can't fully put into words, even now, all these years later, even though I've tried 1,000 times. I was 17 years old. I want you to really sit with that for a second. 17. I was a kid. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was invincible in that way that teenagers always do. That breezy, stupid confidence that nothing serious can actually happen to you. I was wrong about that in the most life-altering way possible. It started out as what felt like a normal Friday night, at least normal by the kind of standards I had back then. I had been running with a girlfriend of mine, a girl I'd grown up a few streets away from in Buena Park. We weren't exactly the most sheltered kids on the block. We'd sneak cigarettes behind the school parking lot, skip afternoon classes, wander into places we had no business being. That night, we ended up at a pool hall off a stretch of road lined with fast food places and pawn shops. The kind of spot where nobody really checks your ID if you don't make it too obvious. We started playing pool with some older guys, and right away they were buying drinks. There were a couple of guys who were maybe 22, 23, and then a third one who was around 25. They were friendly, relaxed, flirtatious in that slightly too smooth way. My girlfriend was into it. I was going along with it because that's what you do at 17 when you don't know any better. I drank more than I should have, a lot more than I should have, and before long the room was tilting and I needed the bathroom just to hold myself upright. I remember gripping the edge of the sink and staring at my reflection and feeling genuinely sick. My girlfriend came in and told me the guys wanted us to come back out. I said I couldn't. I said I just needed a minute. And that's when things started shifting in a direction I didn't understand. She told me they had a hotel room nearby, said she thought if I just got out of the hot, smoky air of that pool hall and had somewhere to lie down, I'd be okay. She said getting into a cold bath would sober me up faster than anything. She was kind of laughing about it, kind of scolding me, saying I was being a baby, that I was going to ruin the night for everybody. I didn't want to ruin anything. I didn't want to be a problem. So I let them put their arms around me and walk me out to the car. The hotel room was maybe 2 miles away. A basic motel off the highway, nothing memorable about it. Beige walls and a flickering lamp near the window. My girlfriend ran the bath ice cold. She kept talking at me, chatty, excited, while I undressed and lowered myself in. And then she mentioned there was something on the back of the toilet. She said it would get me right, make me feel better. I didn't ask questions I should have asked. I didn't think clearly about what that meant. I was 17 and drunk, and my brain was already compromised, and I just did what she suggested. The moment it hit me, I knew something was very wrong. My face went numb almost instantly. Not the warm, fuzzy numb of alcohol, but something sharper and more total. My nose started to bleed, both nostrils, and I remember pressing a washcloth against it and thinking, this is terrifying. But even as I thought that, there was this simultaneous wave of numbness spreading through my brain, a kind of euphoria creeping under the fear, muffling it. I lowered myself back into the bath. The cold water came over me. I held the cloth to my face, and I remember thinking I just needed to ride it out, that it would pass. It didn't pass. I don't know exactly what the moment of crossing over felt like from the outside. I know from what I pieced together afterward that my heart stopped. What I felt from inside was this sensation of sinking, not into the tub, but through it. Like gravity had inverted and was pulling me down through the floor of my own body. It wasn't violent. It wasn't painful. It was slow and smooth and absolutely certain. I didn't see any light, no white tunnel, nothing like the things you see in movies. What I moved into was complete and total darkness. A darkness so thick, I knew that if I held my hand an inch from my face, I couldn't have seen it. And yet I was still there, fully, completely, unbearably there. The word darkness doesn't do it justice, because we associate darkness with the nighttime, with eyes being closed, with something temporary. This wasn't any of those things. This was a place, and time didn't work in it the way time works here. There was nothing passing, nothing changing. Here, time is the movement of things, the second hand turning, the light shifting, your heartbeat. In that place, there was none of that. So when I say it felt like weeks, I mean it genuinely seemed like an enormous span of time had occurred, even though I had no way to measure it, no clock of any kind. I didn't feel torment. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't in pain, wasn't burning, wasn't suffering in any dramatic way. What I felt was something quieter and almost more devastating than that. A complete separation from everything, from warmth, from presence, from the sense that anything out there was paying attention to me. And in that absence, a thought rose up inside me that felt like the truest thing I had ever understood, that I had nobody who would miss me, that I had no real purpose, that I had been drifting through my life without knowing why I was there, and now I was in this dark place, and it seemed almost appropriate, almost like something I had already been moving toward without realizing it. Except there was one thing, one single thread that my mind kept returning to. My grandmother, my father's mother, a small woman with a warm kitchen and hands that always smelled faintly of lavender. She had loved me in a way that felt unconditional and safe in a life that hadn't always offered much of either. I was her only grandchild who had survived past infancy, and she had made me feel that fact, not as a burden, but as something precious. She used to sing to me. She had put me in an Awana program at her church when I was about 10, Wednesday evenings where the kids would sing songs and do crafts and memorize scripture. I remembered sitting in those little folding chairs and singing, "Jesus loves me, this I know." In that darkness, I started to think about that. If he loves people, if he really does, maybe he would love me too. Maybe even here, even now, even in this. I started to sing it inside myself, not out loud because I had no voice, no body, no breath, but in my spirit for lack of a better word, I started holding that song. Jesus loves me, this I know. And something extraordinary happened the instant I did. I began to move upward. It was as immediate and undeniable as gravity. The moment that thought lifted in me, I lifted with it. And as I rose back through whatever I had descended through, something came loose in my chest. A recognition that I had not been abandoned, that I had only forgotten, that I was already loved, that I had always been loved and had somehow lost track of it in all the noise of living. I came back up through the darkness, through the tub, and then I kept going. I went up through the ceiling, through what felt like 2 full floors of open air, and I was looking down. I could see my body there in the bath, still and pale, and I thought very clearly, I don't want to die like this. Not here, not this way. And then there was someone beside me. To my right, a presence I can only describe as radiant. I couldn't see a face. The light coming off this figure was too intense for that. But I knew him. I don't mean I recognized him the way you recognize a person from your neighborhood. I mean there was a familiarity in my whole being, the kind of recognition that lives deeper than memory, that feels ancient. He spoke to me, and there was warmth in it, something almost gently amused. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I didn't know. And he said, very simply and with complete certainty, that I wasn't supposed to be here yet, that it wasn't my time. We moved forward. In front of us appeared something I still struggle to describe without feeling like every word falls short. The best I can do is to say it looked like a park, the most alive, vibrant, conscious park you could possibly imagine. The greens were a shade of green that doesn't exist here. The colors of the flowers, both sides of the path, were not just colors, they were presences. Everything in that place had a consciousness. The grass knew I was walking through it. The trees were aware. There were benches, and beyond the park, rising over a hill, I could see the tops of crystal spires, like the peak of a city made of light. It shimmered, the way heat shimmers off a road in summer. I couldn't see into it, only toward it, only the suggestion of it. The further I walked away from my body, the more joy I felt. And that joy was nothing like any joy I had experienced in life. It wasn't an emotion that passed through me. It was something I merged into. I became it. Everything I encountered, I became part of. I was still completely myself, and yet simultaneously connected to everything around me in a way that had no edges or separation. He showed me something then. It was like a folder opening in front of me, and inside were what I can only describe as agreements. Contracts, but not the cold, legal kind. More like intentions, arrangements made between souls, including mine. There were hundreds of them, stretching out diagonally in front of me, and each one showed someone I was connected to, something we were supposed to do together or do for each other. Some were for my benefit, some were for theirs. He didn't force me to look at them. He didn't tell me I had to go back. He just showed them to me quietly and explained that if I chose to stay, if I let the overdose finish what it had started, these agreements would break. people would be rerouted. Someone else would have to step in, or the moments would never happen at all. I told him I didn't want to go back. I meant it completely. I said I didn't even know what I was supposed to do down there, what the point was. And he said something to me that I have turned over in my mind ever since, that I keep coming back to in the middle of ordinary moments, in quiet rooms, in the space before sleep. He called me sunshine, and he said, "You do know, but it's not time yet." He said that those who needed to find me would find me because of my voice, that my voice had been given to me for a reason, and those who needed it would be drawn to it when the time came. I made my decision. Not for myself. That's the honest truth of it. If it had only been for me, I might have chosen to stay. I made it because of those contracts, because of the sense that something in me was needed, that the people attached to those agreements had not yet received what our souls had promised each other. It was the most sober and clear-eyed decision I had ever made in my 17 years on earth, and I made it in a place beyond the earth while looking down at my own body in a motel bathtub in Southern California. He simply said what sounded like a word, something like a gentle affirmation, and I was back. Not pulled back, not dragged, just instantly reconnected, like a cord that had gone slack, suddenly drawing taut again. I went in through the top of my head, or maybe the mouth, I can't be certain, but it was from the top, not the way I had left, through the spine. And then the cold hit me. The ice-cold water was the first real physical sensation, the first proof that my body was real and mine again. I didn't fit quite right. That's the only way I know to describe it. Like a coat that had been reshaped while you weren't wearing it. Too small, too dense, too limited. My soul felt enormous, and the body felt like it could barely contain it. I got myself out of that tub. I pulled my clothes on without drying off, shaking, lips blue, skin pale as chalk. And I found my girlfriend and I grabbed her, and I told her that I had just died, that she needed to stop, that she needed to never touch that stuff again. She laughed at me. She said I was just high. I didn't have the words yet to make her understand what I knew, so I stopped trying. I walked a block down the road and used a payphone. This was the late 90s, so payphones still existed on corners, and called my aunt to come get me. I tried to talk about what had happened. I went to the missionary lessons I had recently started attending and tried to explain it. They told me it was an act of God and left it there. I talked to pastors, to church leaders over the following months, and they kept returning everything to the drugs, attributing the whole experience to the substance. I rejected that completely. I knew what I had experienced. I had been more sober and more lucid and more genuinely aware outside of my body than I had ever been inside it. The decisions I made there were made in full consciousness. That much was not up for debate in my own mind. The year that followed was hard in a way I hadn't expected. You might think that surviving something like that, seeing what I had seen, would make everything easier, would make the problems of ordinary life feel small and manageable. It didn't. Nothing in my life changed. My family was the same. My circumstances were the same. My struggles were exactly as they had been, except now I knew what was waiting on the other side, knew it was beautiful and peaceful and full of connection, and I still had to be here, still had to move through all the difficulty and confusion of being human. There was a kind of grief in that, and a lot of depression and anxiety I hadn't had before. But there was also something else, something that never left me, not once, through all of it. The absolute certainty that I was not alone. Whatever had been with me in that space, whatever presence had stood to my right and spoken to me with that warmth and that light, it hadn't stayed behind. It came back with me in some form. I could feel it in the moments when things got darkest, a steadiness underneath the chaos, a sense of being held even when I couldn't point to anything that explained it. About 15 months after that night, I received a scholarship, a full ride to a university with housing and work included. It appeared as clearly and specifically as if it had been arranged in advance, as if something had been moving pieces around a board to make sure I arrived at that particular doorway at that particular time. I thought of those contracts then. I thought of them a lot. I think about death differently now than most people do. Death is not what I used to think it was. We are not these bodies. I know that with the same certainty that I know my own name. We are something that inhabits these bodies for a specific and purposeful stretch of time, and that something cannot be touched by death. It doesn't end. It goes somewhere. The something that worries and panics and chatters and obsesses, the ego, the anxiety, the inner noise, that does dissolve with the body. And honestly, I found that relieving more than frightening. All the fear we carry around, the constant low-grade dread of being not enough or not loved or running out of time, that's the ego. And the ego is terrified of death because it knows it's the one part of us that actually ends. But what remains is whole. What remains is at peace. I saw that place. I walked in it. I know what the grass feels like when it knows you're walking through it. I know what it is to be flooded with a joy so complete that the word joy doesn't reach it. I know what it is to recognize a soul you've never met in this lifetime and feel the full depth of a love that was already there before you arrived. We are never alone. That's the thing I most want to carry back and set down in front of every person who has ever felt it. Every person lying awake at 3 a.m, convinced that nobody sees them, that they don't matter, that the world would barely register their absence. I want them to know what I know, that the aloneness is the illusion, that underneath it, underneath all the separation and the noise and the ego and the confusion, we are connected to each other and to something vast and warm and attentive in a way that this life makes nearly impossible to feel. But it's there. I promise you, it is absolutely there. I have been to the other side of the wall, and the thing on the other side is love.